Started. Folks, we're sharing an article by Terry Cummings about the cormorants in the Norwalk River, which are basically feeding in a contaminated river that has 22,000 gallons a day of carcinogenic leachate. So what's happening is the oyster beds are surrounded by, Manresa, Veterans Park, Oyster Shell Park, Meadow and Woodward. The estuary has, the silt from 600 municipalities dredging in the Long Island Sound, killing the lobster industry. And the effects on the oyster beds are, now that John Romano is no longer with us, we don't have to protect our friend. The cat is out of the bag, folks. This is a devastating link on LinkedIn, which we're going to start commenting on because the only friend we had, look what they're saying about the buried cells. There are 3. And here, Schumer stopped Norwalk from dumping. Not exactly true, they're still dumping. But Blumenthal and Murphy are accused by Schumer of ruining the Long Island Sound. That's a fact. We have his letter. When you read the facts here that Hearst won't repeat, it's quite startling that people are concerned about the wildlife, and Connecticut's main objective is, hey, we're talking about the environment. Well, Tong is getting involved. He's covering up 5G, which is devastating. But get back to the point at hand. Look at the contaminated sites that have all been documented for 20 years and covered up by Diane Lauricello and the rest of these, Ricochet Rabbit and Droop Along. You can talk all you want about Bob Duff's family and how generous they are to give and you could talk about Devlin's Park? What's the name of that park, Rick?
Devon's Park.
Devon's Park. Okay, the Sandy Hook donation of contaminated problems, and you can talk about the venting at Oyster Shell Park and how the rowers on the river run there every day, breathing in VOCs. We have PCBs from Ryan Park down the street at a catastrophic 642 parts per million. We have stone crushing in 80 piles.
Vets Park was a former landfill.
Correct. Vets Park was a former landfill. Oyster Shell Park is a capped Superfund site. The police station is a capped Superfund site. Go down the street. Neon. Big problem.
House furniture.
Preschool for kids with a vegetable garden made out of PCBs. We have a problem in Norwalk. It's called Jim Himes. Anything you want to add?
Yeah, the house furniture building on Woodward Ave is contaminated. They have a recirculation field. When the contamination gets to the edge of the property, it pumps it back into the middle.
Right, and then we got Colin Hostin dredging by his backyard, throwing all the material into the salt pond.
Right, silt and fly ash from the power station.
Right, now here's Manresa. Just got stolen. 125-acre
contaminated waste site.
Yeah. Actually, it's radioactive. Coal ash is radioactive, folks. And who stole it? Jim Himes and Bob Duff in an undisclosed deal. And if you think they stole the property, they will, because all they do is cover up the mistakes. That soil is so contaminated, Massachusetts, Pennsylvania won't take it, okay? What'll happen is they'll say it was sent and there's no receipts according to Schweitzer in the Norwalk records. You gotta have your head examined for voting for these people who are A, contaminating the oyster beds repeatedly, killing the wildlife, while their number one objective, so they say, is environmental cleanup of hazards, which they never do. And it's all for their own personal benefit, I might add.
Let's throw the mall in for a cherry, John. The mall was built on a contaminated waste site to be cleaned up later. Who builds a mall on contaminated soil?
How do you clean up a mall? How do you clean up the soil under a mall after it's built?
Not only that, but the plume of those chemicals are coming from Oyster Shell Park underneath Devon's playground.
Right.
Next to stepping stones.
Right, so kids ride down the slide, land on their hands and knees in the contaminated soil, wipe their face, they go home, they sit on the couch, and what happens? Contamination spreads.
Yeah, but Norwalk is going to get a rail yard now so they can keep railroad cars on the siding while they build the bridge next to stepping stones, next to King's chemical manufacturing plant.
And they have the windsocks to show the firemen which direction they can approach a chemical factory that has a permit to dump chemicals in the Norwalk River, like Wearing Deerfield. I mean, what a nightmare that is. I'll tell you, this is a huge cover-up, and they put Laura Cella in charge of hiding shit, and she's going to go down in flames. The Deep is not going to stand for this crap.
But she got an award from the governor being an environmentalist, John.
I know, like 2 weeks ago, her picture's in the paper with Blumenthal giving another award. Let me tell you this. From 2006 to 2016, Blumenthal arrested 400 human traffickers. 0 prosecutions. He gave all the prostitutes an award. Not to call Diane, my friend, who's actually very nice, a prostitute. Oh, she's far from it. She is one of the leading Democrats that is actually trying to do something when, in fact, the deck is stacked totally against her. What will happen, Rick, when they pile drive 400 pilings into the Norwalk River where those contaminated cells are?
The people in Norwalk should see the data that the state collected over the years by testing places like Shorefront Park, the Shorefront Park Beach, and they tested it for years. So once this walk bridge starts, if any chemicals are found coming from the areas they've already tested, it's not coming from the walk bridge. It's coming from either Oyster Shell Park or Betts Park or
the police station.
Yeah, because there was a former ice house that had PCBs in it.
Right.
And according to the
back when they made ice in Norwalk, they had a dumping ground for petrochemicals.
No, but they had ice machines. The ice machines had PCBs in them to keep the machinery, keep the ice chest cold.
Right. So they just pour it out the back door and go.
Well, that's what they did back in those days.
Right. So we have issues on brownfields that are causing poisoning at children's playgrounds, folks, and they won't put the signage up. Fishermen are catching these fish and eating them, and the birds won't eat them. The birds will not eat the bluefish. Unbelievable.
John, this is on the heels of them building new buildings on Water Street, and when the DEP was notified that they were taking dirt out and disposing of it in an unknown source, the DEP was questioned because they didn't call for taking out any dirt. They only called for bringing in dirt. So now they...
hold on. Remember when they dug up the boat ramp? And they decided that the soil was so toxic that they had to put it back in the river?
Because there was no place else to put it.
Unbelievable. Here we go. That dirt should have been incinerated. So here you go. Problem, solution. We should be incinerating these PCB that ultimately go into the food stream, into the oysters. Honestly, people are eating these things. They're touted as being the best oyster on the planet Earth, when in fact the oyster sucks up the muck, okay? All the plastics, microplastics, get sucked up by the clams, and the PCBs automatically attach themselves to the plastics, and you digest them.
The top echelon of Norwalk at one time reported to the Hour that the Vets Park was a former landfill. They used to see cars and other debris going into the landfill at all times.
Right.
Never has it been tested.
Oh, they poured chemical drums into that thing. They got caught and they got fined.
Never has been tested. It's never been tested. And if it has been tested, they've never given those test results to the public. We are not saying Vets Park is contaminated. We asked the city to tell us it's not.
Right. So here we go. John Romano on the Water Commission was begging for money for years and years to test prior to the walk bridge so that after they unleash Armageddon and Pandora's box on the world, which they're about to do, and they won't stop. Look at how they did the construction at the lot across from U.S. boats, right?
Right, and the other fine point of Vets Park would certainly be they just put a brand new playground at Vets Park, and Bob Duff relished the fact that it was put in with all new equipment. We just want to make sure that the ground it was put on is clean. We're not saying it's dirty. We just want the city to tell us that where the new playground was placed in Vets Park recently, that the land is clean.
Yeah, they can't. If you destroy the evidence, for example, in elections, like Connecticut destroyed the cast vote record, without the evidence, they can't prove that the election wasn't falsified. I mean, here you go. Show us the evidence that you've been collecting, like, the water facilities up the line came into Norwalk 10 years ago, tested the oysters at underneath the walk bridge.
Right. All chemicals have a fingerprint ID. They were taking samples along the Norwalk River for the past couple of years before the walk bridge started.
Right.
So they have fingerprint IDs of the type of chemicals that they found up and down the river.
Well, here, it's very simple. I used to go to the walk bridge meetings, and they got in there one day and said, we're going to use Roundup all around to clear this grass out across from the mall. I said, hold on a second. This is the crap that you know causes cancer, and you're putting it in the river where the oysters feed from.
DPW employees refused to cut the grass at Oyster Shell Park because it was suspected to be contaminated at the time. So they went out and bought an automatic mowing machine.
Right. They wanted to cut the lawn by remote control because it was too hazardous to stand on.
Right, and the only reason the union stopped complaining and everybody else stopped complaining was because either the union members were replaced, and then they brought in outside people from all over the country to run the DPW that has no idea what the history of Norwalk was in the beginning.
All right, let's end on one thing. Ready?
Yeah.
I went to those Pride flag ceremonies and the shows they did with all the food trucks and all the, comic relief. They had a stage built. They were doing, little play action things, all for the people, right? All the LGBT community came out in droves, right? Fantastic, right? Except that the land they were standing on is so contaminated that and they never put signs up. Here we go. If they're concerned about the LGBT community, why are they renting a contaminated lot where they're running around with bare feet, feeding children, playing frisbee? Hold on. It's a frisbee field with nets that, you score a goal by tossing the frisbee into the net. Hold on a second. They just contaminated the entire LGBTQ. Now I add AI. The AI community. I'm going to call them the AI community. Why? Because electronically, they intend to replace them. Okay, it's already there. Okay, and I stand by my Rick. I stand by everything you say. You're 100% accurate. Unfortunately, I used to talk to John Romano weekly, and now he's gone. And he was the wealth of knowledge about the cover-up.
Susan Schweitzer used to run the redevelopment authority in the city of Norwalk.
Right.
During all those meetings we had in Ryan Park,
right.
She ought to say, wait until they start digging up.
She never released the report.
Right. She knew.
Hold on. She went to Hearst, and Hearst said in an article about me that I thought everything they did was superb. Are you joking me? We were fighting tooth and nail to get the data.
Hearst had a report from Tim Stella. It gave the history of Oyster Shell Park, and it gave the history of Vets Park. And it's a Hearst document that they will not give up, and they will not. We already have a copy of it. We've been sending it out for years.
Hold on. I have 500 pictures of them pumping the PCBs into the sewer main.
Yeah, that was from Ryan Park. Yep.
Right. It had those 18 buildings had human fecal matter in the basements.
But we stopped them because they were pumping asbestos-tainted water into the sanitary lines going back to the sewage plant, and that was against everything the DEP stood for. So they made them stop doing that immediately and told them, and I think at the time they wanted filters at the treatment plant to catch any asbestos that was still coming that way, because they were actually pumping into the sewers going into the treatment plant at
Jim Himes
Washington Village.
Killed people. I'm not ashamed to say it. Lucy died. Okay, we have lots and lots of videos that we created back then that are on YouTube that no one watches. But let me tell you this. They took that asbestos out with the residents in the buildings. They had rats. They had roaches. They had a year-long gas leak. Remember the gas leak?
Nancy in Norwalk documented everything and wrote everything that she wrote about all that stuff, John. The one thing we have to always remember, as far as Jim Himes and all your other politicians, they always go to Vets Park to make their announcements, and they usually stand in the areas that are most contaminated.
Right. They sit by the podium and explain to you how good government is working, and I'll tell you this. These people are communists. They are all endorsed by the Communist Party. They are undermining your rights to air, water, and life.
Yeah, but back to your original post, John. We have to feel sorry for the birds in the picture that they put up today, of the birds in the Norwalk River eating the fish. But we also have to feel sorry for the rowers also, because the rowers actually row through that stuff. And if they've never been told exactly what's in the water, that right there is a shame, because that's putting people in peril that shouldn't be. They're all good people. The rowers are good people. Everybody that uses the Norwalk River are all good people. And even Oyster Shell Park, they all should be notified of at least the scenario. They can make their own decisions whether they want to take a chance to go there.
Let's do a sales pitch. Ready? Let's come to Norwalk. It's got so many attractions. Yeah, let's come to Stepping Stones next to a chemical plant. Oh, come on down. Come to the YMCA that, the roof collapsed. There's mold in the building. Yeah, the hospital's going to buy it. Come down to South Norwalk where...
But John, you're right about that part of it. But as we both know, they just knocked down the YMCA the day before yesterday.
Yep.
It's already on the ground.
Yep.
Hopefully they did asbestos abatement. Hopefully they did all the things they were supposed to do when they took that building down. But because of their track record, we have no idea whether anything was done properly.
They destroy all the records. They don't tell the public jack. They're not going to tell the LGBTQ community there contaminated from going to Veterans Park and Oyster Shell Park.
When the builders took the dirt off of Water Street and didn't notify the DEP, ironically, they did it on a Sunday and nobody was home.
They dredged the harbor on a Sunday, and none of those inspections occurred.
They do everything clandestine.
Clandestine, yeah. So listen. If 600 municipalities dump their hazardous waste off Norwalk right on the oyster beds, okay? Mamaroneck, Larchmont, up the coast, both sides of Long Island are dumping their hazardous waste off Norwalk. That solution is simple. It needs to be incinerated.
John, it's the history. Atlantic Richfield had a PCB tank on the Norwalk River that used to feed Rowayton when they were developing the computer and such.
Correct. The computer was developed in Norwalk, Connecticut, folks. And the hazardous waste from the first...
John, King Industries has a patent on chromium sludge.
Right.
They admitted to the state and they admitted to the EPA that's exactly what they dumped in the middle of Oyster Shell Park that has never been remediated or cleaned up. There's only a cap on it. And they paid a fine because they admitted dumping that. But they only admitted dumping us. We had a slew of metal companies and everything else in Norwalk where they would by a sewage truck would go. They would pump the contaminants out of these buildings all across Norwalk and in Stamford and Clairol and everybody else. They would come to Norwalk for a nickel.
Hold on, Clairol went from Stamford to Norwalk to dump.
They all did. They all dumped in Norwalk because it was the cheapest place to dump because they took like a nickel for $1 to dump waste in both Vets Park and Oyster Shell Park.
Unbelievable.
And they were never able to pin anybody on it because they didn't have the records.
So it's just a criminal enterprise, top to bottom, basically involved in poisoning Connecticut.
But everybody can tell you how great Norwalk is come live here. You know,
Hold on a second. You know, like, hi, you come to Norwalk, you buy a condo next to the mall, right? You have a dog, and you walk it daily on a contaminated lot, and they never tell you.
Those very same people who bought condos didn't realize they were going to put a rail yard in, just like Stamford has, next to their condos, within 100 feet of this rail yard sits condos where people are living, and they don't even know what's coming. They don't even know it's coming. They bought these places years ago, and they didn't realize how bad it was going to get in that neighborhood. And obviously, the big drumbeat right now is...
You know what's the funniest part?
They don't want OH to open up a stone crushing facility on the other side of the river.
Right, but they did, and they're using it.
On the opposite side of the river, they have a chemical company, and now they're going to have a full rail yard going in so they could house rail cars coming down from Springfield through Danvers.
Right.
So in other words, it's very possible to have rail cars full of chemicals sitting on sidings 100 feet from stepping stones.
Well, you know what was interesting? I saw a story last week. Let's end on this because it's huge. There was a shipping container found that they took off a train in California, not Connecticut. But when they opened it up...
John, there was back in 1978, so just go on to something else. Forget about that.
Oh, yeah? Okay.
No, let's just keep it Norwalk. Let's just keep it Norwalk and what the Norwalk citizens should be apprised of. We're not saying everything's contaminated. We just want the city to tell us it isn't.
Okay, cool. Rock and roll, bro. Yep.
That's the easiest way to do it. As long as they say there's no contamination coming up through Devon's playground.
Yeah, let them put it in writing.
Right. And we have people from the DEP that are beside themselves because they told Norwalk years ago.
Norwalk has been misleading the deep for more than 10 years.
Yeah, and they've been spending money on stuff that we don't need. It's stuff, instead of cleaning up the city, they've been hiding it. They've been cosmetically rolling it over.
Nice.
And we know that. We know that.
Well, by the way, Connecticut, the Deep was gutted, and every professional that knew what he was doing is gone. And now they got people there working from their houses that are new employees that haven't been trained. So here we go. We
still have DEP employees that were working in Norwalk all those years that know the truth, and they're ready to retire.
Well, not Schnelling.
David McKeon was the one that did all the work on Oyster Shell. He did all the work on Vets Park. I approached him about 2 months ago. He called me back on the phone. He was beside himself. He couldn't answer any of my questions because he was surprised that anybody remembered what he said 20 years ago. But we have it in writing. We have I gave him everything that he said 20 years ago, and I asked him,
unfortunately.
What's changed since then, Dave? And he said nothing.
Well, hold on. I've been suing them. I've been filing Rick.
He's the one that made the recommendations to have Vets Park tested 20 years ago, and they ignored him. And now he's in charge of doing damage control for the state for Vets Park. Why? Because he was here 20 years ago.
Yeah, but you know who's in charge of damage control? Judge Gennario.
John, the people in Norwalk deserve to hear from people in Norwalk who run the show. So forget all those other people. The people that are...
But you know what? I have 21 outstanding for you, and they are 20 years old.
John, but who in the city is allowing this to happen? The Democratic Party.
No doubt. I went to Guilford. I met a lot of nice people, and they're about 50% Republican, 50% Democrat. But our Common Council has 0 Republicans. Bye. We have 0 Republicans and 14 Democrats. And you know whose fault it is? The Republican Party. Hello. Have a great day. Yeah, blame Fred Wilms. Yeah,